Welcome back for another session of the Breakthrough Code. I'm super excited to have Trey Lockerbie here, and he's actually a man of many talents. He's got a couple interesting things that we want to talk about. You have a beverage company, which I am loving this. It's called Better Booch. It's in stores across the country, and you just even signed up Costco, but you're in Target, you're in lots of grocery stores, and I'm having the ginger boost, which tastes like amazing ginger ale. And I'm not making that up. This really is good stuff. But also you're a host of a podcast called We Study Billionaires.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the drink company a little bit later, but let's go into the podcasting. But I want to go back before you were even on the podcast. So there's a point in time where you met or had dinner, I guess, with Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
And it was life-changing. First of all, how did you even come to know Warren Buffett? Like, how was he introduced into your life?
I wouldn't say I know him. I did meet him through a family friend, and it was sort of a dinner I kind of even just heard about and sort of invited myself to, if I'm being honest. Yeah. I basically just got on a plane and it was just sort of like, I'm coming to this thing. So
and how old were you?
I was, we just did the math the other day on this. I think it was about 8 years ago now.
Okay.
So not too long. I think he was 83.
And how old were you though?
And I must have been 27.
Okay,
yeah.
So 27 years old. And you knew about him before though? You'd heard about him?
So a little bit, but I didn't know nearly enough. And it set my course, in a different direction after that dinner. But I was actually at that point very deep into options trading
which is the exact opposite of what Buffett would say.
Exactly. Yeah. So I had actually picked that up because I was a touring musician. And for those who don't know, being a touring musician is kind of like being a professional traveler. And so there's all this downtime throughout the day. You're sitting in an airport or in a green room or on a bus or whatever. And I just found myself sitting there, and I'm kind of a productive guy.
Yeah, you can't just sit around.
Yeah, and I was like having trouble really just sitting around. So I was kind of thinking, well, what can I do? Like just maybe even using the internet that I can make more money on. And I got down the options trading rabbit hole, which you know all about. And
I've done that too. Yeah. And I had good runs and then I gave most of it back.
Exactly. And then I was following the story of someone who had, turned $100,000 savings into $100 million or something like that. And I was talking to Warren about it, and I did the math shortly thereafter we had dinner, and I was thinking to myself, like, his business made $100 million like in those 3 hours that we were just sitting there, something like that. It was just, it really sunk in for me that what he was doing was just such an order of magnitude different. And the main question I asked him, which, in hindsight, it's not the worst question. It's certainly one he's been getting for decades that I've, realized after the fact. But it was just sort of I understand you do value investing. That was cool before the internet, before we had efficient markets, but does that still work today? And he was just smirking at me, being like, if
all right, young whippersnapper.
He had this Cheshire cat grin, and he would just say, if the markets were efficient, I wouldn't be as wealthy as I am, and I was like, fair enough. Yeah. He gave me some books to read, which I thought was interesting.
He's a big reader.
Yeah. I actually brought my copy of The Intelligent Investor with me, just to have him sign. I know it's one of his favorites. But anyway, so that was my dinner. It was about a 3 hour long thing that I'll never forget. Yeah,
and so life-changing in what way? Like, what did you come out of there thinking that was different? How did your story shift that day?
So much. I would say, for one, it changed my whole strategy around investing, right? And I went and I did read the books, mostly Adam Smith books, but there's some others.
Written a long time ago.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I'm going to go back and read a book written in the 20s or 30s.
It was, it's not the like biggest page turner, but I did enjoy it. And so that, Buffett likes to say that he's a better investor because he's a businessman, a better businessman because he's an investor. And when I met him, we had just basically started Better Booch. Oh, okay. And part of the impetus for that was, this beverage, when I was learning about him before the dinner, I was thinking like it was aligned with what I had already had in mind, because tea has been around for thousands of years. I wouldn't say it's a boring business, but it's certainly not one that's going to be disrupted tomorrow. And so that kind of made me even more bullish on kombucha. But anyway, his philosophy of doing that meant that the more I learned that I could study about investing, the more I could implement it in my own business.
Yeah.
So while kombucha and investing in this billionaire podcast, all these things feel like so like separate worlds from each other. In my mind, they kind of like self-reinforce each other. So
I like that. I love that. Yeah. No, I think that's true. So the better you are in business, the better investor you are. The better investor you are, the better in business. I think everything all works together in the end, anyways. The better business person or way you treat people in your business, the better you treat people in your family, like all that. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Can I also say that I was a musician before.
Yeah.
And one thing that my mind really changed on was thinking that finance and things like that were just sort of these dry, everyday things that there's no art in it.
Yeah.
And I think about it now, and if I were in a recording studio, you have every sound in the world available to you, every word, every there's only 12 notes in a scale, but there's certainly infinite amounts of things you can do with that. And it's not unlike, in my opinion, Buffett taking thousands of stocks and filtering it down into a certain portfolio. I mean, there is an art to it at the end of the day. And so it opened my eyes to just so many things that I was thinking about in a different way.
Yeah, and even though he has formulas, I mean, he's still using his imagination to see something in a business that other people are missing, right?
Right.
Which creates the opportunity to make an investment and make money through time. He's not as interested in, doubling his money in a day, because he knows if he does it right, the markets are inefficient. They're undervaluing a company.
Yep.
Right. But he has the courage to be able to make a bet, and he's had some where he maybe made the wrong bet, but he's had way more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's able to do that. So you became a different kind of investor, right? Options trading kind of probably faded, or you don't do it as much.
Correct.
Or do you do it at all anymore?
I don't do it at
you
all.
You don't do it at all. Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing that you were doing, you had one dinner with him, and you don't do it at all.
Yeah.
And so many people are marketed, learn how to trade this or do this and get rich quick. And,
right.
And the people making the money are the people selling the courses, probably on that type stuff for the most part. Not to say that they are doing something malicious, because I think some probably believe, and some are probably pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But for the average person, it's hard to do. But this type of investing you're talking about now, which, by the way, it's what I believe in after having tried many different things and being a stockbroker coming out of college and seeing what's out there. I really truly believe that being in the market long term and really picking great companies is the absolute best way to make money.
Buffett says no one likes to get rich slowly, right? And then and it's funny because I do study these billionaires for the show, and I talk to a lot of them, and you really hardly meet any that are options traders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are ones out there, but the most people who have achieved that level of success have done it slowly over a long period of time, compounding something great, So it's not just disparage that style of investing at all, but it's just, it didn't fit my lifestyle at the end of the day. I love investing, but I'm not trying to necessarily sit at a computer, looking at volatility all day and things like that.
Yeah, and I had to change my story on that too, because I was, I was willing to take risks, and so hey, no big deal, and then having gotten burned a few times, now some of the best investments I've made are real estate investments, which are not get rich quick, but they tend to, and they can go down, but you're collecting rents and you have all these advantages, and then investing in the stock market, but buying really great companies. I have lots of companies that are that are clients of mine that are in tech, so I get to see into the tech world, which I love the tech world. Got beaten up. Well, actually, they're coming back a little bit now, but they got beaten up there, recently. But it's a lot of fun for me too to invest in technology companies and just ones that I really believe in and in what they're doing.
Yeah, again, I'm going to reference Buffett probably a lot. He's my go-to, but
he's even gone a little bit into tech now, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. He's probably made the best tech investment of all time. And with Apple he put in $30 billion, and I think it's at $130 billion. So, I think I don't know if that's been matched. But interestingly enough, he also says that he's, I think 85% Benjamin Graham, 15% Phil Fisher, and that. Just I probably have a different ratio, right? But it's I do believe in this idea I'm actually, this one is from my friend David Gardner of The Motley Fool, but he says, you know, your portfolio should kind of look like your best vision of the future. And I really like that way of looking at it to a degree, to your point. Like,
what do you mean by that?
Meaning like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily, like, I don't know, the easiest thing I could pick maybe is Amazon or Tesla, let's say. But let's say Amazon. Like, if you think that this kind of ties in nicely, he's got another rule of thumb called the snap rule, which is basically like, if you snapped and Amazon went away, would anyone care? Would anyone work? And my life would definitely be very affected if that happened. And so, you know, this idea that will Amazon be more important in the future than it is today, and things of that nature. And so your portfolio looks like a bunch of companies that you believe in, either the mission or the technology or what have you, and thinking, okay, 10 years from now, will these companies be more relevant or less relevant?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, I bought Amazon as soon as I realized, hey, there's packages arriving at my door every day. I might as well be the owner of this company versus just the customer of this company.
Yeah.
And then they bought Whole Foods, like, oh my God, you know, I'm at Whole Foods all the time.
Yeah.
So.
And you know, it's funny, like with some of those companies, people typically look at things like price to earnings ratios, and they look extremely high with these tech companies, right? And it's funny because in some of those instances, I wouldn't say valuation doesn't matter, but it's really deprioritized because they're just in a different league of their own. I mean, these are some of the best business models of all time.
Yeah.
And they just continue to grow. Like, I think in its 20th year, Amazon grew over 20% in 1 year, right? And so you would think that's like startup. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just unheard of, and so it's hard to even figure out what the right valuation for a company like that is.
Yeah. So you were a musician, and do you still do any of that?
Yeah. In fact, my wife and I really started the tea company to get off the road. She was
she's a musician too?
Yeah, she was. She was singing background for Rihanna for about 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And so we had both met at this time where we had been all over the world. We really saw that lifestyle firsthand, and we said, this is not really actually what I want to do long term, because we had different values. We wanted to be home, raise kids.
Yeah.
So 6 months into dating, we started a tea company together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically it's been, it's fallen off to a degree because the business and the podcast and now 2 kids.
Takes most of your time, right?
It does. But I'm happy to say that actually just over in this last Christmas break, we put together a little home studio again, and then we've been starting to write again. So it's kind of back in my life.
What do you write songs, but you also play an instrument?
Yeah, I would say I'm a songwriter. She's definitely a singer, and also a songwriter, but she's probably the best singer I've ever heard.
Wow.
And so, but I play instruments kind of by default just because of the song, but I'm nowhere close to being, like some people I know.
And so you're a talented writer, though.
I think so. I mean, I think like lyrics are my specialty. If I had anything to focus on, like, I think I'm halfway decent on that, but that's as far as I'll go.
I love it. Well, that's creative. And, Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge, and we should spend more time in our imagination, and that's where those lyrics come from. But also it's where investment ideas come from, and it's 100%. Where beverage companies come from. That all comes from your imagination.
You can be creative in anything, right?
Yeah.
You can be an artist in anything. And I think that's something I've really grabbed onto recently and tried to adopt. And they don't have to be so separate from each other.
Yeah. So again, I want to get to the beverage company in a minute, but tell me about the podcast. We Study Billionaires.
Yeah.
First of all, how the heck did you get on? You're a musician. Now you're interested in investing. How did you get on a podcast that now is going out all over the place?
It's a very good question. So the funny thing is, after I had that dinner with Warren Buffett, I read all these books. I read literally everything I could find on him because I just got so obsessed, not only with his strategies, because that's, but it's really his philosophies. He has these amazing philosophies just for living a good life.
Yeah.
And so I got really into that. And then, I was learning about how he calculates intrinsic value and these things. And I said, someone's had to have just made an intrinsic value calculator on the internet nowadays. So I Googled that. I found this site called buffettsbooks.com. These guys who put this up were putting up these free courses on how to invest like Warren Buffett, and they had this calculator and these other things. So I went through those courses. I was just devouring everything, and they launched a podcast. And I was already there, and I said, okay, I'll listen to this podcast. And so the funny thing looking back now that we're 650 episodes in is on episode 3, I was actually a call-in questioner. I think so. I was probably the first listener of that show. I mean, I was right there at the right time. But anyway, so years go by. I'm listening to that show every week on my commute to Better Booch, and it's just my continuous education practice, like learning about the stock market and everything else. And I ended up going to Omaha to the Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway meeting, and I ran into the host of the show there. I got to meet them there. We really hit it off. One of them invested in Better Booch at that point, so we got a little bit close. Yeah. And then I had this moment, and I think you'll appreciate this, but I was driving home one day from work, and I just thought to myself, man, I this doesn't happen that often, but I just had this like overwhelming moment of gratitude where I was just thinking, man, I don't know how my life could get any better. I'm leaving my dream job to my dream house and my dream family and my dream car. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if life can get any better. And I was listening to the podcast, and I said to I go, unless I was maybe the host of this podcast. Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, it was just like a thought, but
imagination. I'm a
believer that set something off. Yeah. Because like within a few weeks, they announced they were looking for a new host.
And at the time, you didn't even know they were looking for a host, or that there was even a possibility that another host
there
was
no
be on
there was no world, there was no path for that to happen really. Even though like I kind of knew them, I didn't have the background or anything. So anyway, I just threw my hat in the ring, and then I ultimately got the role. Yeah. And I think they picked me because the audience it's not mostly finance people. It's mostly doctors and lawyers and people in other professions who are just learning how to invest for themselves. Right. And I'm right there learning alongside them. And I think they liked that. Yeah. Because there's certainly people more qualified than me who applied, but I think I just, fit more of the audience because I was a long time listener. And so they picked me up, I think, from that. And I've been doing it for a couple of years. Yeah.
But you have a curiosity about you that's really healthy and rather than coming in, I know everything, you're like, hey, I'm going to go learn along with all of you, right? And, let's go along this journey. So what have been some of the biggest things you've learned from doing the podcast? Like, if you picked like 2 or 3 things that have been really phenomenal for you, like what would they be?
Well, I would recommend every year at the end of the year, I do a top takeaways episode where I highlight clips from interviews I did. And I say, these are the moments that really like kind of set me on a new trajectory.
So did you already do that for 2022?
I did. And
so usually share with us a couple of, what were they? Yeah.
So for that, it's interesting. Like there's lots of technical things that come up, like different indicators that I might add to my arsenal or my strategy. And those are great. There's also things like, I would say macroeconomic themes that are playing out, and even things around like just, fiat currencies or whatever it might be that like play into the whole narrative that I'm buying into. I would say really though, overall, the thing that I've taken away from doing this for a couple of years is that like, I like to say no one knows nothing. I mean, to a degree, right? Because I'm literally talking with billionaires who are so incredibly smart, and oftentimes they're saying the complete opposite from one another. Yeah. And they're so incredibly smart, and they're experts in their field, and yet they're saying with such confidence, that their beliefs, and sometimes they're directly opposite of each other. And so that can kind of create this alphabet soup in your brain where you're just sort of like, I don't know what to believe. So my point is like, yes, these are all incredibly smart people, but what I've taken away is like, you just have to think for yourself and say, okay, well, what do I really think is going to be, the best vision of the future for my portfolio, whatever.
Yeah. And which style fits kind of the way that I like to operate and think and feel. I mean, for me now, and I had a friend kind of teach me this, that, and it's kind of the Buffett way of investing, but he just buys really great companies and he holds them. And I was trying to market time, and I had people managing some of my money that were market timing, and it seemed like I was always just kind of like right at where everyone else was. It wasn't getting me ahead, and then I finally just went to that strategy, and there's companies I've been holding now for years and years and years. It also shows there's many ways to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you don't have to just do one, and I actually, with what I do, I'm a little bit more aggressive than my advisors are now. I've got a new set of advisors that I give some of my money in the market to, and I have probably more swings in mine because I'm going for more aggressive companies, but ones that I really believe in, and I think that will be relevant 10 years from now. Whereas, they're a little bit more conservative, I guess. So it doesn't go up as much, but it doesn't go down as much.
Yep.
Yeah, which is nice to have that balance too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I would also say that one thing you take away is just, it's like the more I learn about macro, the more I go back to Buffett and his not focusing on macro at all, because again, it just seems to go in these loops, and it might be like the more I learn about investing, the more I just want to passively invest. It's like, it's funny how you kind of start somewhere and I feel like I have a deeper understanding of the wisdom that people like Buffett and others say when they're like, just put your money into an index and just do it consistently and don't think about it. I mean, because really you can get so tied up with so many ideas and maybe distract yourself.
Well, the only way that I time the market now is when things I like go down. I like he says, it's on sale. Rush in, buy some more.
That's a big learning. That's really hard to do in practice, but so important.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite things to do. It's like, all right, it's on sale now. And also for me, people get excited. Most people get excited about spending money. Buying new clothes, buying a new car. Buying stuff that typically is decreasing in value the minute you buy it. And I grew up like that because I didn't have much growing up. My mom was a single mom and my dad passed away. We didn't have a lot of money, so buying something new was like really a treat. But then I trained myself to get excited about, buying a company, right? Or a piece of a company, which is what you're doing when you invest. And to me, like, I can't wait to, I love making money doing things that contribute value and really help people. And then I love investing in great companies, and that excites me. It's as exciting as buying a new car or new something, a new house or something like that. And actually, we own a lot of real estate, so we're buying new houses, but we're renting them and really getting value from them too.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, Buffett, like, his whole thing is just shifting your mentality a little bit by thinking about, I'm not buying this stock, I'm buying a piece of a company.
Yeah.
And what you just said, like, you're really becoming an owner of that company.
Yeah.
And thinking about it that way is just a game changer. Like, so many people will open up their Robinhood app and be like, I don't know, the price was 10% higher yesterday and now it's here, so should I buy? And it's like, that's not how this works necessarily, right? I mean, like, there's so many other questions, and if you were looking at it like a business and the value and the underlying things that make up that stock price, you'd have a different approach.
Yeah, my wife was an early investor in Tesla because we bought, one of the early Teslas.
Yeah.
Not the sports car, but when the Model S came out.
Yeah.
And I remember I ordered that car, and for me, my other car was coming up on a lease. I ordered it, and then she said, well, how come you get that, right? And I didn't want to have, at that time, like, we've had, I think, 8 of them now.
Yeah.
But at that time, I didn't want to have 2 electric cars because I wasn't quite sure.
I know that.
And well, your car's a little bit, it's not coming up on lease.
Right.
And she goes, well, I want that car. I said, all right, you can have it. And it became her car, and she loved it. She was like, I love this car. And she invested in Tesla. And at the time, our financial advisors were like, no, don't do it. It's a dumb decision, which, from Buffett's standpoint, if you really looked at it, probably back then, it was not too smart. But she just knew in her heart, like, she believed that was the future.
Yep.
And she's made so much money on that investment.
Insane,
even though it's come down a little bit. She's made just so much money on that investment, like crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was a big time skeptic of Tesla, even though I own a Tesla.
I was too. Like, when she bought the stock, I'm like, and so she put a good chunk in, but probably not as much because I was like down on it.
Yeah, I finally bought some stock recently because the full self-driving finally hit. Yeah. And I tried that and I was like, okay,
it's pretty cool.
This is insane.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I get that completely. Yeah.
We only have Teslas now, and even our 2 children who are 29, 26 have Teslas. So we're all in on that. And it's interesting too. Like, that's a company that, the valuations didn't make sense because people were comparing it to a car company.
Exactly.
It was never a car company.
Yeah.
It's a technology company.
Right.
That's why I actually did buy this one recently because I always leased them, and we actually made money buying them back on the lease because recently, like when the car shortage and COVID and everything,
sure.
like, you know, we were selling them back 3 years later for almost what we bought them for.
Yeah.
But now you can't buy it out at the end of leases when you do the lease.
Yeah,
But
mine's been a good like mine's literally gone up in value since I bought it, which is unheard of for I mean, maybe unless a classic car or something. But yeah, mainly because like even the full self-driving, which I bought for $5,000, is now worth $12,000. Just the software, you know. So it appreciates. It's just threw that whole idea of a car company on its head, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So hey, let's talk about the beverage company.
Sure.
So Better Booch. So and I know that you said 6 years. You bootstrapped it. You know, two musicians, right, starting a business. So it wasn't like you had a lot of business experience. First of all, what gave you the courage to even come up with this idea and start a business around? And by the way, it is delicious. It's really, really good.
You.
And the one I'm drinking supports your digestive and immune health. We'll talk a little bit about kombucha in a minute. But how did this even, how did this even come into your imagination?
Yeah. So I was introduced to kombucha through my sister. She's been a cancer survivor for a long time. She found kombucha through that community. It's very popular in that community because it's actually alkalizing in your body, which is a good prevention for cancer. And so she was really adamant I drink it. So I went and I bought some. And back then there was only one brand, and it was really polarizing. I mean, it was hard to drink. And it was almost like a badge of honor if you could drink it, right? Like that's how people approached it. It was
Finish
sort
it
of like,
up, get through it.
Yeah, it's like choke it down. And so I kind of swore off. I was like, I can't do that. I was living in Nashville doing music at the time. I lived next to this green shop. They were doing this how to brew kombucha class one Saturday, and I said, maybe I could brew it myself and figure something out. I really was a believer in the benefits, but I just, so I did and started making it at home, loved it, moved here to California, met my now wife, and we were thinking of other ideas. And I just said, I've been brewing this kombucha. We love it. There's only one brand, there needs to be more. Like there needs to be an alternative. And the way I think about it now is sort of like, if I compare it to when beer was invented, it was probably a double IPA when it first came out or something, and then not knowing that you can make it in other ways. You can make pilsners, you can make other like sessionable crafts, craft beverages. So kombucha is very similar to that. It's a very similar brewing method, but it's tea based. And so anyway, we started out very, humbly at farmers markets
with your recipes.
With our recipes, we had to use a commercial kitchen. So funny enough, I was driving up here. This kind of to answer your question more directly. One thing that really triggered the okay, let's do this was we were really trying to get off the road. And I was thinking of everything I could do. And there's a place literally around the corner from where we're recording this called Republic of Pie. I used to live down the street here, and it was a new coffee shop opening up. And I thought to myself, all right, I just need a little cash. Maybe I'll just be a barista, And I walked in there. I had never been a barista, I had been a musician since I was 18. I walked in there to be like, hey, are you guys hiring? And they were like, we have 500 applications right now, so get in line. And that scared me a little bit. I was just sort of like, okay, I can't, I just thought I'd get a job at a coffee shop. Right
I can't even get a job at a coffee shop.
So I was like, I guess I gotta do something else. And so that really kind of got the momentum behind launching the actual brand. But yeah, we ended up bootstrapping it for a long time. Finally got the attention of some big time retailers, and then really pivoted to kind of say, okay, let's take it as big as we can go and take investors. And I wanted that experience also.
But 6 years before you took investors.
Yeah, it was a long time of, we started in bottles. So there was a lot of hand labeling, hand filling, hand capping. We manufacture ourselves to this day. Now we have something that more resembles like a beer brewery and canning line and things like that. But it was started out a lot of manual labor in its early days, mopping the floors afterwards, the whole thing.
What kept you going? Because I know that wasn't easy, right?
It was not easy. That's a good question. I think what kept me going is I feel lucky in this idea that I had been all over the world. I really got to experience my dream career already in music to whatever is satisfying to me. And I knew at that point that my lifestyle and my values were more important than anything. Yeah. So being my own boss was very important. I knew that much. Being in control of my own time was very important to me. Putting out a product that I felt was still creative, that I believed in. I couldn't think of anything better than this tea at that point, because to me, the mission became, okay, this is actually, now that I know it can taste delicious, everyone should drink it because it's better than a soda in every way. It's lower in sugar. It's got probiotics and all these beneficial acids. There's studies now coming out from Stanford and in Nature recently, and some others showing that kombucha, kimchi, a few other fermented foods decrease inflammation in the body. Wow. So, and I'm a big believer that the more time goes on, the more we're going to understand about the microbiome and how gut health affects everything. And the gut-brain connection is a real thing, and how, now they're connecting the brain, like mental health to your gut. So to me, it's been self-reinforcing the whole way, because almost like something I knew just from experiencing it is now being backed by science and all these amazing studies coming out, which just gives me more and more, conviction in it.
So back when you were a musician, if someone would have told you that you're gonna be a kombucha company owner, what would you have said?
No, people did. I mean, people literally were like, "You're doing what?" And
and you're probably thinking, "I'm doing what?"
There was definitely moments. I mean, look, my wife and I, we had friends come visit us at the farmers market, and I had a pretty good career with other artists, but she was in that whole other echelon with Rihanna, so she was playing the Staples Center, and then the next week she's at a farmer's market, and people are like, "What are you doing here?" So there was a lot of like mental things to get around, but I think for us, we just knew, like I said, it was very lucky to get that opportunity to just have that conviction and know that was the longer term thing we wanted to build.
Awesome. And now you're nationwide.
Yep.
How many stores are you in? Do you have any idea?
I think we're in 6,000 or so right now.
6,000 stores. And you said a lot of Targets.
Target, Whole Foods, Sprouts, Walmarts. We just had our first Costco launch. So plenty of others, but all 50 states now. Yeah,
how rewarding is that to see all that hard work now coming to fruition?
It's very rewarding. It's very hard, but it's also, it is really rewarding. I mean, I still to this day, even just in LA, have these moments where I'm walking around and I see somebody drinking it, and that's a cool thing.
That's awesome.
And it's not unlike music where someone is listening to your song or
reading your book.
Or reading your book.
It's getting value from that.
Yeah, not dissimilar. So that's the rewarding part for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting is and I kind of caught it from the way you answered that last question, is even though you've now in 6,000 stores, it's still challenging, right? Because now you're operating at a different level. There's new issues that you didn't even worry about when you were in 3 stores, right? Now it's, manufacturing and inventory, and we got this big order now we have to do for Costco. And
100%.
And so some people think like, you get to a point and it's all easy.
No.
It's never, because as you evolve and go to that next level, it's new levels of thinking, actions that you didn't have to take before, now you have to conceive and take too.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and it was not easy getting through COVID, even though we were lucky that, we were what do they call it? Like a certain kind of company that, because we were filling grocery stores, we were kind of critical, I guess. Yeah. And so that was lucky, right? Just that alone. So, but I mean, getting through COVID and the supply chain issues that came from that, and there was a lot of survival, just waiting for turnover at big retailers to work itself out and have our moment to finally get a meeting and things like that. But we're scaling, we're hiring, so you're dealing with more and more people.
That's awesome. People are laying off, you're hiring. That's great.
Yeah. And so it's cash flow, raising money, all those things. It's all pretty challenging. But again, like I would also, I know this now for sure. You can't, do something just for money, right?
Yeah.
Like I know I would have quit so long ago if
This is too hard if it's just for money.
If it were just for money, like no way, you know,
Yeah.
like it certainly has to be something you like really believe in. So
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, you've got a great heart. I'm sure you're a
Thank you.
awesome dad.
I try. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell, and a great husband, and an entrepreneur, and a podcast host, and a musician. Like so many great things in your life. Really awesome having you on. If you were to give people just some parting advice, not on investing, but really just in life, like people that may have been you, that musician that now are, what's my next step? What words of encouragement or what words of advice would you give them?
That's a really great question. This might seem a little counterintuitive, but I really think that if you're starting anything, you should begin with the end in mind, because I think that with our company, we bootstrapped for 6 years. A lot of that was because we didn't really have a vision for it. We just, it kind of quickly exceeded any expectation we had for it.
Really
so we kind of caught ourselves being like, wait, what do we want to do with this thing? And so, we probably would have made other choices had we really thought it through and said, we're setting out to do this. Here's the long-term goal we want out of it. And if I were to do it again, I would do something like that. And
good.
You would know if you should raise money sooner, if you should buy bigger tanks sooner. You should do certain things if you kind of have that vision when you start. So that's a piece of advice. I
love it. And the important thing too is make that vision big and juicy.
Yes.
If it's just within the realm of what's going to be easily achievable, then you operate in the confines of your old self. If you put it big enough out there, and that's what we talk about in the Breakthrough Code, now all of a sudden you do have to think differently. You have to look at the world differently, because who you were yesterday is not going to get you there.
Yeah.
But you are a different person now, 8 years later, or however many years later.
Just past 10 in the business.
10 years, I mean,
like that,
so, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I've jumped industries a number of times, so I certainly know that anything's possible at this point.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hey Trey, thanks so much for being here. You're a wonderful being, and also just lots of wisdom for people. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Make sure you come back and see us again, and go out and create your breakthroughs. Live your life without limits. Do what this young man did in his life, and really go big and accomplish great things.